So let's start. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host Avik, and today we are discussing a story that bridges generations, cultures, and the hidden toll of the immigrant experience on the mental health. So imagine like being born into poverty and then adopted into a world where you never fully belonged. And imagine that surviving a brutal political regime and having your family torn apart and finally making it to the land of opportunity, only to find yourselves drowning in bureaucracy and battling an invisible war within. So, this is the story of Jean Trin Walk Perkins. So, welcome to the show, Jean.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Lovely, lovely. So, Ricard, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all the listeners, and but before that, I'd love to mention the story of Jin. Uh, Dear listeners, this is a story of Jin, a woman who survived incredible hardships but carried the emotional scars of displacement and struggled um, throughout her life. Her son, uh, I'll mention afterwards her son name. So her son has spent over a decade meticulously piecing together her story in Spring Flower, sweeping through the three-volume memoir that honors her life, her sacrifices, and the resilience of the immigrant mothers everywhere. Yes, and her son is Richard Parking Sung. Yes. So today, Richard is here joining us to talk about the hidden mental health struggles of the immigrants and how trauma is passed down through the generations and the lessons we can all learn from his mother's journey. So let's dive in. Welcome to the show again, Richard.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Avik.
Lovely, lovely. So, Richard, first of all, definitely thank you so much for coming to the show. And I have to say, your mother's story is both heartbreaking and inspiring. And uh, so, from here, I'd love to ask, what motivated you to dedicate 10 years of your life to completing the Spring Flower?
It was 2014. My mother was dying in a nursing home, and she had been in that nursing home for about a decade and refused to just leave this world. So I asked her what kept her from leaving. And then, of course, it was a monologue because my mother hadn't been responsive to anyone. She hadn't being able to recognize who I was for quite some time prior to that. And so when I was leaving her room, I suddenly said to myself or her that I know what's keeping you from leaving, and maybe you are concerned about who will finish your memoir. So right in there, I promised her that I would finish it for her, only if she will promise me that she will leave this world in peace and go somewhere else, anywhere, and be free again. And it was strange, as if she heard me. A couple months later, my mother passed away, and I was left with this enormous task,
Yeah.
an immense challenge, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
and obviously, I didn't know what I was getting into, but yes, that's where I began.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally understand. Yeah. Definitely. And so, was this process of compiling her memoir more about honoring her story, or did it also become a journey of personal healing for you?
Oh, that's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. look this way. I didn't realize it would be a redemptive process for me, a healing process for me, until I was well into the process, 4 or 5 years into it, and I realized it was exhausting in every way,
Mm,
mentally and physically and emotionally.
mm,
And there was a period of time I couldn't write a single word uh,
mm,
until I sought help. And later on, I also had help from my editors and publishers,
mm,
and also my American side of family, who many of them are accomplished authors. And so with all of their help, I picked up the pieces and continue for the next 4 or 5 years and to complete this memoir. And then only now I can look back on this process and realize that yes, it was redemptive and it was healing in on many fronts and from many perspectives. Right.
understood. Yeah. So, like, I mean, your mother lived between the two worlds, never feeling fully Chinese, never feeling fully American. But how did that identity struggle affect her mental health?
I think
Uh-huh.
so. She spent about 10 to 12 years working on this memoir from early 1980s to about mid 1990s. And then right around that time, mid 1990s, and she fell in deep depression. I think writing the memoir, compiling the memoir,
Mm,
uh, depressed her. And I think in part was that she had to dig into her
mm,
past, right? Relive all the painful moments. And I think for all her life, she thought herself as an American, actually, because she was adopted by American
mm,
medical missionaries since she was what, 1 year old. And she even lived in America during World War II. And so, I mean, her Americanness or her American identity was thoroughly established,
yeah.
confirmed to her. And then, of course,
Mhm,
30 years trapped in China, she was essentially a foreigner in her own country and witnessing a very strange period in Chinese modern history. I guess the
mhm,
lack of a better word, I use the word strange. And of course, in 1980, she returned to the States. She called America her home, and she brought me with her. And then that began a new journey for her to understand that she was just one of the million faces, migrants who are trying to come into this country and I guess take away resources from people who are already here. And that was when she realized she was neither American nor Chinese. So I think those elements played into her mind as she was writing this memoir, and I think uh, cumulatively it got to her mentally and emotionally. Right.
mhm. Understood. Understood. That's totally understandable. And also, like, we often hear about trauma being passed down through the generations. So, how did your mother's experience shape the way that you approached your own life and mental health?
Well, I think while my mother had been a foreigner in her own birth country for about
Hmm.
30 years, I was born in
Yeah.
China, right, in the 1960s. And I was thoroughly a Chinese
Mm,
teenager, a kid. When I came to the States, I was
mm,
14 years old. And so that completely changed the course of my life, right? I
mm,
didn't know anything about my mother's past and
mm,
that she had been adopted by American
mm,
missionaries and had lived in America. And actually, the English was, in many ways, her first language or native language. And so I learned all of that on the flight.
mhm.
And then I learned all of that once we settled down in Boston,
Yeah.
Massachusetts. And it became a set of struggle that I was not prepared for because I didn't know practically a word of English at the time. And then for the next 20 years, I really had to learn how to become American, right? And that was what my mother wanted. So that she made it clear to me that if you're going to survive in this country, you must speak well, speak English and speak well, and you must learn the
Mm,
American way, right, to achieve the so-called American
mm,
dream. But then, right around late 1990s and early 2000s, I started visiting China, start visiting other countries, or start actually leaving America.
mm,
I then realized that I actually am Chinese and I've forgotten how to speak Chinese and I've forgotten about Chinese history. And I have become a foreigner in my own birth country. So I
okay.
began a new set of journey. So the last 20 years essentially was a U-turn for me, right? So I think, I think my story is probably similar to most migrants, immigrants. You're caught between two different worlds, caught between two different cultures and languages. When you tell people you have two, you're bilingual, you have two cultures, sometimes that implies you have zero. You have zero
Mm,
culture, zero motherland, zero
mm,
language, right? So it's a struggle. It's an ongoing struggle.
mhm. Understood. Understood. Lovely. And also, like, if I have to say, I mean, um, like your mother endured so much, like poverty, war, displacement, bureaucracy, yet she still managed to become a successful ophthalmologist. So, how did she find the strength to push forward despite everything?
That's a good question. I think
Hmm.
that's probably the impetus for her to sit
Hmm.
down to write her memoir.
Mm,
The the most, I guess, important message for
mhm,
this three volume memoir is to
mm,
remember and to honor all the fantastic,
mm.
extraordinary people that she
Okay.
had the fortune of encounter, and starting from her American adoptive parents, right? And she was born in dire
Mhm,
poverty in 1931, and lo and behold, and her biological mother was looking for milk for her and found this refugee camp across the river because at the time the
mm,
Yangtze River had flooded. And my American grandparents were setting up these camps for all the flood refugees. And so they eventually saw my mother and adopted her. And
mm,
then starting from that point, she really uh, lived the idyllic childhood, more almost like the movie Forrest Gump. And
mhm,
then the second half of her life is almost like the movie Schindler's List. And she had the fortune of meeting people out of the woodwork time again when she had the trouble, when she was running thin on her own energy, running thin on her own courage to continue. And these
mm,
people will come out of nowhere to help her and to carry her the extra yard. So she thought she was able to make it to today, meaning in the
mhm,
1980s. She needed to sit down and
mm,
remember these people and put stories about these people on a piece of paper, right?
mm. Understood. So, okay, and one more thing is uh, like, do you think women immigrants today still face similar struggles, especially when it comes to balancing the career ambitions with the cultural expectations?
Yes, I think a woman today continues to struggle, even though they're somewhat better off than maybe
Yeah.
25 years ago or 50 years ago, even 100 years
Mm,
ago. And but discrimination, towards
mhm,
women continues in this country, even
mm,
today here or in
mm.
China or in Asia, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and I think I should go back to you asked my mother how my mother became a ophthalmologist. In some ways, it was during the first few years after communists had taken over China. They actually needed physicians, so they shuffled a lot of college kids into the medical profession. So during that time, my mother also met up with some really wonderful professors and mentors who actually coached and taught her how to become one of the
Okay.
most successful surgeons, ophthalmology surgeons in China.
Mm,
And so yeah, so I think she struggled as a woman, as a woman physician in China, and she struggled after she came to the States. Uh, but I think her struggle may not be uniquely her own, right?
understood. I think her story is definitely a testament to how resilience isn't just about survival, but it's all about pushing forward when even when the odds are stacked against you. So that's a great thing. And also, like, as you were compiling Springflower, did you discover things about your mother or even yourself that you hadn't known before?
There were many anecdotes we
Hmm.
scattered in the memoir. Things
Hmm.
are again I didn't know that she actually recorded. Uh, but you know, I think one thing I found very interesting about working on completing her memoir was that
Yeah.
my mother became a human to me.
Hmm.
For most of my life, my mother was this,
Hmm.
perfect person who was brilliant, smart,
Hmm.
courageous. And I had her on this pedestal, right? And
Yeah.
I feared her in some ways, right?
Hmm.
Because she held me to the some of the highest expectations, most unreasonable expectations. But you know, working on reading what she had written and completing her memoir, I understood that she's she's just like the rest of us. She's like just like
Yeah.
me, scared at times and uncertain and
Hmm.
angry, and but also again appreciative and grateful. Whenever things got rough, there'll be people helping her out and
Hmm.
carry her that extra yard. And without those people, she wouldn't have made it through those 30 years in China.
Hmm. Exactly. And also, like, uh, how did those discoveries change the way you see her life, or even your own role in the family's history?
I think I think this is redemptive, healing for me because I discover many things on my own path, right? And I think I'm only happy that I was able to, and again with the help of many people I encountered, and with their help, I was able to complete this memoir, and then I'm grateful that I can play a small part of helping my mother remembering and honoring the people that she thought was well worthy remembering. And these are certainly extraordinary human beings, again, starting from my American
Yeah.
grandparents all the way through the people that we met, we encountered in China, right? And also including the people who helped her re-immigrate back to the States. And so, yes, I'm just an ordinary human being, right? But I'm glad I was able to play a small part in
Hmm.
completing this essentially a chronicle or recording the history through her lens and through her eyes and perspective of the people that she knew. And these people are worthy remembering.
Exactly. Wow. Lovely. That's really, really lovely. I mean, it's amazing. Even after people are gone, their stories still have the power to transform us. I mean, uh, Richard, like, this has been such an important conversation, and your mother's story isn't just a history. It's a reflection of what so many immigrants face today, and from identity struggles to mental health challenges to the bureaucratic hurdles that make life even harder.
Right.
So for anyone who is listening, if you have ever wondered about the untold stories of the people around you, or if you have struggled with your own sense of belonging, I highly recommend check out Spring Flower. It's a book that bridges generation, cultures, and emotions in the most powerful way. So, uh, Richard, like, where can people find your book and connect with you?
So if you would type Spring Flower and Jim Perkins, it will show up in Amazon.com or Barnes Noble. I also have published a website recently just for the memoir. It's called Richard Perkins and then my last name Hsung. So richardperkinshung.com has all the information in the website. Right.
That's awesome. And I'll make sure to link everything into the show notes so that everyone have reach to it. And if today's episode has resonated with you, dear listeners, take a screenshot, share it on social media, and tag us. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And remember that mental health and belonging are the journeys and not the destination. Keep listening, keep learning, and most importantly, keep telling your stories. So until next time, stay strong, stay connected, and keep walking the path to a healthy mind and a healthy life. So, see you soon.